right, let's dive into one of the most powerful and, honestly, dramatic stories in the entire Hebrew Bible. It's the story of a king's spectacular fall from grace and the secret anointing of the kid nobody saw coming. This is a tale all about pride, regret, and the huge difference between just going through the religious motions and having true, from-the-heart obedience. This line, wow. This is the emotional core of our whole story. It's this absolutely staggering statement from God that kicks off a chain reaction, and it's going to change the fate of an entire nation. So, let's get into it and unpack what in the world is going on here. So here's our roadmap. We're going to break this down into 6 parts. We'll start with the king's big test and see exactly where it all went south. Then we'll dig into the main lesson here, meet the incredibly unlikely new chosen one, see the wild spiritual fallout, and then finally pull it all together to see what it means for us.
Okay, so let's set the scene. You've got King Saul, the very first king of Israel. The prophet Samuel shows up with a mission, a direct order from God himself, and it's a test that is going to push his loyalty to the absolute limit.
And this command is, well, it's intense. It is total. God says not just to defeat them, but to completely, utterly destroy them. We're talking every man, woman, child, and even all their animals. No half measures. This wasn't a suggestion, it was a crystal clear directive. Which brings up the obvious question, why so severe?
To really get this, we have to rewind the clock a bit. This command didn't just come out of the blue. See, the Amalekites were this predatory tribe that had viciously attacked the Israelites when they were at their most vulnerable, picking off the weak and the stragglers as they were escaping from Egypt. This was seen as a direct slap in the face to God, who had promised way back then that a day of reckoning was coming. Well, for King Saul, this was that day.
The command was clear. The historical reasons were set. But what happened next? Well, that's where our story takes its tragic nosedive. This is the moment of failure, and it's a big one.
And you can see the problem perfectly right here. On the left, you've got God's command, complete destruction. On the right, you've got what Saul actually did. He spared their king, a guy named Agag, and he kept all the best sheep and cattle. Now, this wasn't just a little oversight. It was a direct contradiction of the order. You could say he obeyed, but only the parts he wanted to. So when the prophet Samuel shows up and confronts him, Saul has an excuse ready to go. And it's a very spiritual-sounding one, isn't it? Oh, don't worry, we just saved the best animals so we could sacrifice them to your God. But let's be clear, the text tells us this was a lie. Israel had tons of animals for sacrifice. Saul kept the livestock because of simple greed, and then he tried to wrap it up in a pretty religious bow. Saul's flimsy excuse actually sets the stage for one of the most profound, most important statements in the entire Old Testament. This is the moment where we get right to the heart of the matter.
Samuel just cuts right through the nonsense with this timeless truth. He perfectly exposes the difference between outward religion, the ritual of offering a sacrifice, and true obedience, the kind that actually comes from your heart. God isn't impressed with our religious shows. He wants our hearts. He wants, as David would write later on, a broken and contrite spirit.
And because of Saul's flat-out disobedience, God drops this bombshell of a verdict. But hold on a second. How can a perfect, all-knowing God regret anything? Doesn't that imply he made a mistake? This is a really important point, so we need to make sure we understand it right. Okay, so the key here is a big word with a simple idea, anthropomorphism. It's just when the Bible uses human language and emotions to describe God's feelings so that our human brains can kind of grasp them. So this isn't God going, oops, I picked the wrong guy. Think of it more like a parent expressing deep, profound sorrow and disappointment over a child's terrible choice. It's about divine grief, not a divine error. And finally, when he's totally cornered, Saul admits the real reason he disobeyed. It had nothing to do with sacrifices. It was about his approval rating. He was more afraid of what his soldiers would think than he was of disobeying God. He put the approval of people over the command of his Creator. And with that confession, the kingdom is officially ripped away from Saul. But God, he's already moving on. While the prophet Samuel is mourning the fall of this king, God sends him on a secret and frankly pretty dangerous mission to find the next one. So the search leads Samuel to the house of a man named Jesse in Bethlehem. And one by one, Jesse parades his sons out in front of the prophet. And these guys are impressive, right? They're tall, they're strong, they look like kings. There's 7 of them. And one by one, God says, no, not him. And this is why.
Samuel, just like any of us would, was looking at the outside, the height, the strength, the resume. But God gives him this incredible insight, this peek behind the curtain at the divine hiring criteria. God isn't looking for what's on the outside. He's looking at the heart.
You can just feel the tension in the room, right? 7 sons, all presented, all rejected. Samuel has to be confused. He knows God told him to come here to anoint one of Jesse's sons. So he asks this one pivotal question that just changes the course of history.
And it turns out, yep, there's one more son, the youngest one, the one who was apparently not even important enough to be invited to the ceremony in the first place. David. He's out in the fields, smelling like sheep, doing the dirtiest job. And the second he walks in, God says to Samuel, "That's him. That's the one."
The very moment that Samuel anoints the young shepherd David with oil, something massive happens in the spiritual realm. The consequences are immediate, they are profound, and they're going to define the rest of both of these men's lives.
And this right here is the shift. It is a great divergence, a spiritual handoff. The very same Spirit of God that empowers a king leaves Saul, the disobedient one, and at that exact same time it comes to rest, powerfully, on David, the obedient shepherd boy. One is emptied out, and the other is filled up.
The aftermath is instantaneous. Saul begins to be tormented by a harmful spirit, and in a moment of just incredible irony, his servants suggest bringing in a musician to soothe his tormented soul. And guess who that musician is? David. But the text makes a crucial point here. It wasn't just David's pretty music that made Saul feel better. It was the presence of the Spirit of the Lord in David that actually drove the other spirit away.
So, after all that, this epic story of 2 kings, 2 hearts, and 2 spirits, what are we supposed to do with it? Why does this ancient story still matter to you and me today?
Well, it really boils down to 3 huge takeaways. First, God cares way more about the why behind what we do than just the what. Real obedience starts in the heart. Second, God's measuring stick for greatness is completely upside down from the world's. He looks right past the resume and the appearance and checks the character. And finally, our choices, to obey or disobey, they have real, tangible spiritual effects in our lives.
And that leaves us with one last thing to chew on. In a world that, a lot like Saul, is obsessed with appearances, with popularity, with doing whatever feels right, what does it actually look like for you, in your life, to truly listen for God's voice and simply, with your whole heart, obey?